Okay, so let's get into this. We've spent years doing these deep dives on, specific criminal groups, cartels, mob families, guys like Freeway Rick Ross.
Right, individual case studies.
Exactly. But today, we're going to try and elevate that perspective a bit. We are basically enrolling in the unofficial University of the Underworld,
A high-stakes university for sure.
for sure. And the mission is to extract the core curriculum of what people call the game. We're looking for those philosophical statements, the rules, the street wisdom that comes from people who operate where failure is. I mean, it's life or death.
For decades in federal prison.
Right. And we have an amazing stack of sources to pull from. Interviews with drug lords, hitmen, smugglers, mafia soldiers, gang members.
And even the law enforcement who hunted them, federal and local.
We're really trying to find genuine insight here. What did these figures believe made them successful? Or, what was it that ultimately broke them?
And that search for genuine insight, that's where we have to be really, really critical. Because we're not just here to collect cool quotes or, profound-sounding anecdotes. We have to relentlessly examine whether this game is actually true, transferable wisdom,
Things that could apply anywhere.
or if it's just a self-serving mythology, a story these guys build to enable destruction, to justify incredible violence, and honestly, to rationalize the devastating consequences they brought on everyone around them.
So wisdom versus mythology.
That's the framework. That's the lens for this entire deep dive.
That's a crucial distinction. And when you look at our sources, it feels like we've got the whole syllabus. I mean, we're drawing from Cuban-American cocaine godfathers like Apache,
Harlem crack kingpins like Unique.
mob informants like Joe Barron, former Hells Angels leaders, elite cartel commanders.
Aryan Brotherhood shot callers, even an ex-CIA officer talking about global instability.
So we have the view from the top, the wholesaler, the boss, and the view from the street. The mules, the dealers, the enforcers. It's a full immersion course.
It is. And when you start to categorize this curriculum, the core syllabus, especially for illicit entrepreneurship, it basically organizes itself around two pillars, just like any business school.
Which are?
Resource management and risk mitigation. The real question is, what principles did these guests consistently credit for their longevity or their explosive earnings?
Yeah.
It wasn't just brute force, it was meticulous criminal business acumen.
Okay, so let's start there, with the money. In any business, legal or not, if you can't manage your capital, you fail.
You're done.
And the first core principle of this curriculum seems to be what we can call the discipline of reinvestment and scaling. The sources just overwhelmingly suggest that most people who got huge sums of money, they failed because they treated it like, immediate spending money.
Exactly. This is what we could call the anti-slavery principle. You see it implied in what successful operators like Freeway Rick Ross talked about.
Right.
The rule is dead simple. You focus on business growth, on expansion, on security, not on rapid consumption. The second you take your first big score and buy the Lambo, the mansion, or fund a big personal vice.
You're creating huge liabilities.
Huge. And those liabilities require continuous high-risk income just to maintain them. You literally become a slave to the lifestyle you just bought.
It's lifestyle creep, but in the most high-stakes environment imaginable. And that lack of discipline is, it's perfectly shown by that story of the former fraudster we heard from.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't even a drug dealer.
No, but he was great at getting the money,
Okay.
but he made it blow. He got $100,000, which for most people is life-changing.
A huge amount of money.
And he spent it all in 6 months. A lot of it on a daily Roxy and heroin habit.
And that's the perfect cautionary tale, the math on that. If you're spending, maybe $250 a day on substances, it shows that the skill to get money is totally useless if you don't have the skill to manage it.
It just disappears.
It vanishes. And then you have to take immediate high-risk actions to replace it, which, leads directly to getting caught or getting killed. The wisdom there is universal. Reinvestment is a discipline no matter where the profits come from.
So once you have the capital and the discipline, you need a good product. Longevity, market dominance, especially in the drug world. It all seemed to hinge less on price and more on controlling the supply chain and potency.
This is a masterclass in vertical integration. The most successful guys weren't just moving volume. They were obsessive quality controllers. They focused on brand consistency.
Like Unique, the Harlem crack kingpin.
Exactly like Unique. He laid it out perfectly. He didn't just buy prepackaged product. He bought the powder and cook the crack himself
Why? What was the advantage?
to guarantee the quality was superior and consistent every single time.
Yeah.
That instantly set him apart from all the competition selling cut or impure product. In a market like 1980s New York, that was the difference between being a flash in the pan and a real kingpin.
And that idea, quality over price, it feels a little counterintuitive, but it's powerful. We heard a drug trafficker say it so clearly. Having the best product is always better than having the best price.
Because the users will always pay more.
He quantified it. He said with pure Colombian blow, which he'd buy wholesale for maybe $2 a gram, he could flip it for $100 a gram in LA.
A massive markup.
And his point was, if a user only has $75, they won't switch to a cheaper, lower quality supplier. They'll go find the extra $25 to get the good stuff.
It's fundamental brand loyalty. You're not just selling a drug, you're selling trust. Trust in a world where product quality can be, all over the place.
And the Harlem crack pusher, he showed this amazing entrepreneurial skill in just getting the product. He was buying a kilo for $15,000 when the street price was $22.
That's a massive profit margin right out of the gate, just based on his negotiation and his access to capital.
But he also knew his limits. He realized his Connect was moving product faster than he could locally, so what did he do? He expanded. He went out of town where the markup was even bigger.
He understood geographic diversification. He understood arbitrage. He was treating his supply chain like a Wall Street trader.
So you've got the discipline, you've got the product. The next huge hurdle is, well, not getting caught. This requires some really sophisticated operational security and risk management. This is the real game of movement and logistics.
And it demands serious audacity in your negotiations, especially with suppliers who hold all the cards. We saw this with Apache, the Miami cocaine godfather.
The art of negotiation and bidding wars.
Right, what they call the Eric Nori principle. It's basically playing your suppliers against each other. Apache would dangle these huge verifiable cash offers like $1.2 million in $100 bills.
The preferred denomination, right, because of the reduced bulk.
Exactly. For 100 kilos of product, he would create this sense of urgency and competition among his own Colombian suppliers, forcing them to compete for his business. It ensured he got the best product at the best price.
The logistics of just moving this stuff, it's fascinating. Went way beyond just hiding it in a car. The counter-surveillance was, like you said, military grade.
Well, it makes sense because one of the smugglers we heard from was a former Marine.
Right. And he talked about using chop shops to build these incredibly sophisticated compartments in cars. And this detail, this blew my mind. Drilling holes in the trunk.
Yeah, that was amazing.
So that road dust would accumulate on long drives, like 800 or 900 miles, making the car look normal, giving it the right road wear instead of looking suspiciously clean.
And don't forget dipping the kilos in liquid oil to throw off the dogs. I mean, that's not just common sense. That's applying detailed knowledge of olfactory science to your logistics. It elevates the whole game.
But his techniques weren't always that technical. Sometimes it was just pure psychological games.
Absolutely. The pot smuggler's survival techniques. This shows a kind of psychological warfare against law enforcement. He realized cops are human, so he would drive mostly in bad weather.
Thunderstorms, heavy rain.
Because he figured cops are way less willing to get out of their car and get soaked. It's a cold, calculated risk assessment.
Wait, I have to push back on that a little. Isn't driving in a thunderstorm just riskier? I mean, you could wreck the car. Why prioritize avoiding a cop over avoiding a crash?
Because the consequences are completely asymmetrical.
How so?
A car accident is a loss of money, maybe product, time. Being pulled over with 100 kilos in the trunk is a life sentence. In the math of the game, a collision is just a business loss. Detection is total existential failure. He was optimizing for survival, not for safety.
That's a chilling way to put it. And he used identity, too. He put a Marine sticker on a trap car.
And when he got pulled over, he just improvised a story about enlisting. He leveraged the cop's cultural respect for the military. The cop just said, "Drive safe, soldier." Using that kind of human respect for operational security is just, it's next level.
It really is. Okay, let's talk about the math of bulk trafficking. The sheer volume they were moving meant they could just accept a certain amount of loss.
Right. The pot smuggler, the one using the mail, sending 3 boxes a week.
25 pounds total.
He said he could lose up to 80% of his shipments and still turn a huge profit.
That's incredible.
It's basically an internal insurance policy. He understood that the high risk of mail interception was completely offset by the volume and the low cost of acquiring the product. If he was making $1,000 profit per pound, that model was generating $1 million a year in profit. It's a high-risk, high-reward model that only works at massive scale.
And then what happens when the product finally gets to the street level? Even there, the smallest interactions are managed with this, I don't know, this strange, dark business wisdom.
We have to look at the customer experience. The former crack kingpin, a guy named Butch, he talked about a crucial lesson he learned from his mother, who was a street entrepreneur.
Treat the customer well.
Exactly. This meant he kept a bag of ones for his pitcher, the guy doing the hand-to-hand sales. So if a user, a fiend, was $1 short on a $10 bottle, they wouldn't have to leave empty-handed.
So he was extending credit.
It's more than credit. It's immediate fulfillment. It's a sense of, decency in a completely indecent transaction. He said he was providing an experience, not just a service. That small detail guaranteed repeat business. It's microeconomics applied directly to addiction. He secured their future revenue stream. The wisdom is undeniable, even if the context is horrific.
That's a really smooth transition from operations and money into the second part of this curriculum. The philosophy of trust, loyalty, and the brutal limits of friendship when the pressure's on. This stuff defines the internal culture.
And this section really highlights the core philosophical battle in the criminal world. The mythology of the criminal code versus the cold, hard pragmatism of self-preservation.
Which usually means cooperation.
Usually. So you have the no-snitching doctrine. It's the foundation of the whole mythology. It's preached as this universal law, but the sources show it's practiced very selectively.
The mafia informant, Joe Barron, he talked about the intense pressure, the universal shunning that cooperators face.
Yeah.
He said he was immediately threatened in Otisville prison.
Just because his companion was targeted, it shows the shunning is absolute, even for guys who supposedly signed up for the life.
Right.
But what's really critical is understanding how that code can become this absolute self-destructive law. The Mexican Mafia, La Ime, they demonstrated the extreme logical end of this. We heard that story about the guy with only 10 days left on his sentence.
They killed him, stabbed him 32 times.
Because a guard reported him for writing an underage girl, which just meant writing letters to her.
10 days left. I just can't get over that. What was the rationale for something so extreme?
Because the code isn't about individual pragmatism. It's about structural stability.
Okay.
If they let him walk free after what they saw as a betrayal of their internal moral code, it doesn't matter how much time he had left, it would destabilize the entire system of discipline. The code becomes this absolute rule that's more important than any human element, like proportionality.
So the mythology demands the maximum punishment.
Always.
Every single time. But the reality is, lots of people flip. And they don't just do it out of weakness. They have their own rationale that they believe is more important than the criminal code.
We have to look at those motivations. For the smuggler, the former Marine, it was pure survival.
Right. He said he ratted the whole thing out, only after he realized he was already caught. DEA, FBI, IRS, they were all on to him. And in his words, they were pissed off they hadn't gotten to take him down themselves.
So he didn't flip to avoid getting caught. He flipped after he was caught to try and control the narrative. Exactly. It was a damage control move. Then you have the motivation of protecting others. Loyalty gets redefined. The Virginia kingpin, Mullah, he got 32 years, a devastating sentence.
But his family got immunity.
His family got immunity and was let go. For him, the deal wasn't about his own freedom. It was about the survival of his loved ones, saving them from the consequences.
And sometimes the reason is just deeply personal. The mob informant, Joe Barron, he said his whole goal was to find out who killed his father. He never wanted the mob life.
His cooperation was a personal quest, a vendetta. He was using the FBI as a tool to get his own kind of justice.
But cooperating, even for reasons like that, it just exposes how ruthless the state can be.
This gets to the FBI's true loyalty. Barron believed he saved a judge's life from a hit that was ordered by Dominic. I mean, that's a huge service to the state.
A huge service.
Yet, when Barron himself was arrested later on some stupid charge, the FBI agent just shrugged. He gave him no leverage, no credit for saving one of their own. It just perfectly illustrates the FBI's view of informants. You are purely a transaction. Once you're no longer useful, your past service means nothing.
And the betrayal wasn't just, external with informants.
Yeah.
The rules of the mob itself were breaking down from the inside.
This is key to understanding the decay of that whole world. The mob enforcer, he said Dominic killed a guy because he owed him $250,000, and he called that the dirtiest part of the whole game.
A sign the mob was losing its mind.
Because the old rules, the old philosophy said you never killed over a debt.
Why was that so important? I mean, Their whole business is based on extortion and money.
Because the mob's power relies on structure, on predictability, on a perceived hierarchy of violence. Killing was for disrespect, for betrayal, for protecting the organization. When you start killing over a financial debt, a sum that could have been negotiated,
You destroy the trust.
you destroy the whole foundation. You signal that you've gone from being organized crime with rules and governance to just disorganized anarchy driven by short-term greed.
Which makes those internal justifications for betrayal even more fascinating. Guys like Sammy Gravano, they framed their betrayal as actually upholding tradition.
Precisely. Sammy Gravano's choice to help kill Paul Castellano, it wasn't presented as a power grab.
No, it was justified because Castellano had broken so many rules himself, specifically the rule against selling drugs in the mafia.
So in Gravano's mind, Castellano's violation of the code made it necessary to take him out. He had to do it to save John and his crew.
So he's saying he's preserving the purity of the organization.
It's self-preservation and a power move framed as enforcing tradition. The logic is so self-serving. We killed the boss, not for power, but to save the code he abandoned. It's the ultimate example of the mythology being used to justify the most pragmatic, violent treason.
This whole curriculum would be incomplete if we didn't talk about force. When to use it, how to justify it, and, the difference between necessary violence and just counterproductive destruction.
Violence in this world is currency. It's not always emotional. Often it's just a tool for market regulation, for enforcing boundaries, for intimidation.
The smartest guys seem to realize that violence is expensive and that negotiation is just better business. We heard from the NYC crack kingpin about negotiating boundaries.
Yeah, that was incredible.
A rival saw a shooting war was about to start, pulled him aside, and basically did a cost-benefit analysis. He said, "We're going to lose more than we win."
That's pure business logic winning out over ego. The rival offered a reasonable solution, and the kingpin agreed to move his operation just a little bit to 107th Street. They avoided a conflict that would have brought in the police, lost some customers, and gotten their people killed. They saw conflict as a business cost to be avoided.
But force was needed to establish that dominance in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
The same kingpin talked about the necessity of display. When he was first setting up his turf and met resistance, he came down with a solo shotgun. That initial, decisive show of force was a deterrent. It sent a message that any future resistance would be incredibly expensive for the other side.
And this brings us to how these people see themselves. The Hells Angels leader, he made a clear distinction between standard criminality and a codified outlaw lifestyle.
What was the difference in his view?
Outlaw behavior meant living outside the law, fighting rival gangs, but not, engaging in petty theft or preying on civilians. He even described the Hells Angels taking on this quasi-governmental role. They called a meeting with street gangs in Ventura County and told them to stop drive-by shootings.
They were regulating the violence market.
Exactly. He claimed it was an intercession that law enforcement couldn't do. They positioned themselves as these internal regulators, maintaining a dark form of order to preserve the overall environment. It's how they see themselves as different from common criminals.
But then you go from that, from negotiated boundaries and internal rules, to the scorched earth model of groups like the Zetas, where violence isn't the last resort, it's the first and only option.
The Zetas completely changed the game. They didn't do alliances. They used their military training to do advanced surveillance, identify all the local drug spots, the puntos de venta, and then, instead of negotiating, they tortured the existing dealers into paying them taxes.
The atrocities were compared to ISIS.
Yes, they didn't want alliances. They wanted absolute terror and absolute control. Violence was the only currency they accepted. And it shows that while calculated force can work, that kind of unbridled visible brutality, it eventually leads to massive state intervention because you become too visible to ignore.
And when that force moves inside prison walls, the rules change completely. They become more ritualized, dictated by gang hierarchies.
Inside a max security prison, violence is a language. It's about discipline. We have to distinguish between the common acts. You have slashings or buck-50s.
Right, named for the number of stitches.
Usually. They're the most common form of gang discipline. They're not meant to kill, but to permanently mark someone. It's about enforcing obedience and hierarchy.
And then there's the lethal violence.
Stabbings, or burners. Those are normally meant to kill, a permanent removal. But we heard stories where inmates were ordered to stab someone without killing them, just to put in work.
To prove their loyalty.
The purpose shifts. It's not about lethality anymore. It's just about demonstrating your willingness to follow the code no matter what.
And the power dynamics are so complex, often involving the guards themselves in these bizarre situations.
The role of the guards varied wildly. In Texas, we heard they'd let inmates fight if they asked permission, or they'd just watch, as long as it was one-on-one. A kind of tacit acceptance of self-regulation.
But the most shocking example was in Hazleton.
Without a doubt. A white cop saw a Nazi lowrider member's knife during a search and told him, "Take off, man, you need that more than I do."
The guard just let him go with the weapon. Why would he do that?
It's this bizarre symbiotic acknowledgement of the environment. The guard recognized the unspoken truth. In that place, the knife was necessary for that inmate's survival and status. By letting it slide, maybe he was ensuring the inmates stayed focused on each other instead of the guards. Or maybe he just preferred regulated chaos over dealing with the paperwork.
Still, even in a culture where violence is normal as auto, as they say, there are limits. Limits based on tactical reality, not morality.
The Zacharia's refusal is the perfect contradiction to the idea of blind obedience. Here's a guy living in a culture of extreme violence, but he refused a suicide mission.
The one against the armored vehicle.
Right. To walk alone with just a pistol against an armored vehicle with 10 escorts, he asked, "¿Qué caso tiene?" What's the point?
He wasn't going to die for an unwinnable fight.
Exactly. And that shows that even for a professional killer, the act has to have some internal logic. Survival or winning? Dying pointlessly was rejected. That survival instinct can be stronger than even the most rigid cartel orders.
So now let's zoom out to the macro level, the structural critique. Did these people see themselves as rational actors, just exploiting a market, or as victims of a rigged system?
The perspective from inside the game often provides this really scathing critique of the war on drugs and the justice system. It suggests that the game they play is just a natural result of systemic failure.
The first big critique is aimed at the war on drugs itself. The sources all seem to agree that full drug legalization would not be a killing blow to these criminal organizations.
Not even close, because they're so diversified. Mexican organizations especially have embedded themselves into the legitimate economy. They're almost imperceptible. Their business models are so advanced now they profit from almost every structural failure, including the very conflict designed to stop them.
They profit from U.S. funds for the war on drugs, from companies selling tactical gear.
And the real insight is the massive economic shift into new product lines. They've pivoted hard into human trafficking, generating up to $14 billion just from migrant smuggling under the Biden administration. It's a product that never runs out.
That is a sophisticated arbitrage of border policy and global instability.
It is. We heard about Chinese nationals paying $35,000 a head for VIP smuggling treatment. The cartels are running a multi-billion-dollar international logistics company. Drugs are just one part of a huge portfolio now.
Which leads to this strange idea of the cartel as government. The power dynamics in Mexico are just bizarre. When criminals in the West run and hide, the cartels act like a government body.
The fact that they write apology letters for kidnappings when they're worried about international attention is staggering.
Why do they do that?
To manage their brand, to maintain stability, to avoid intervention from the UN or the US. They're demonstrating that they control the territory and they enforce their own rules, like a de facto state.
And that's all reinforced by the assumption of political corruption. The sources suggest the new Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is guaranteed to be favorable to the cartels, just like her predecessor AMLO was accused of being.
So the cartels aren't just existing alongside the state, they're woven into it. It gives them a level of impunity that's just foreign to Western organized crime.
The critiques aren't just about Mexico, though. We heard some really sharp analysis of the U.S. justice system from people inside it.
Specifically targeting the tools prosecutors use.
Right. A defense lawyer talked about how federal prosecutors use evidentiary privilege motions to protect illegal surveillance tech, like stingrays.
The things that mimic cell towers to gather data.
And they just refuse to answer questions about it, even when there's a subpoena proving they bought the technology.
And sometimes judges will dismiss the case rather than force the prosecutor to answer, which is a powerful admission. It shows that protecting the illegal methods of intelligence gathering is more important than getting a conviction in that specific case. The criminal element sees that as total institutional hypocrisy.
And that feeling of hypocrisy, it just fuels their defiance, especially around disproportionate sentencing. We heard the former NYPD officer's outrage about the no-bail system in New York.
But he also criticized the victims for not having street smarts.
Meanwhile, the Virginia kingpin, Rula, he felt the hypocrisy directly.
Yeah.
A 34-year plea deal, which he found insulting, and then the judge and his own lawyer scheming to have him lie to the jury.
Mula's story suggests the system wasn't just flawed, it was actively rigged against him. And when you see the guardians of the law actively undermining it, well, your self-justification as a rational actor gets pretty solid.
And even with all the violence, these groups are sometimes accepted by their communities, like the Italian mafia, viewed by some as Robin Hoods.
Well, the war in Culiacan is shredding that illusion a bit, but yes, that acceptance is rooted in local economics. These groups are often the de facto economic engines in poor areas. They provide jobs, loans, security where the state has completely failed. That contributes to the mythology that they're necessary protectors.
So that brings us back to the internal story. How did these people actually see their own role in all this?
You see this profound contradiction in figures like Ali Sadiq. He said he felt disconnected from his morals while selling crack. He had his own code, never sold to kids or pregnant women. He believed in honor amongst thieves.
It was a psychological shield.
Completely, but at the end of the day, he was selling crack. He was enabling the destruction of his own neighborhood. The philosophy gave him comfort, but the consequence was pure devastation.
Then you have the purely rational actor, the guy who sees the consequences as just a manageable business cost.
The drug trafficker who, when asked if it was worth it, said absolutely worth it. His goal was $1 million, and he only served 18 months.
He saw the prison time as an acceptable cost.
All low cost, even. And what's more, he fully integrated his criminal past into his new legitimate future. He uses the experience as material for his YouTube channel, for his jokes. He got what he wanted and used the experience to pivot. For him, the game had a clear, profitable exit.
And finally, there's the outlaw distinction. The Hells Angels leader again, saying he lived outside the law, not as a criminal.
It's a semantic distinction, but it's important for their identity. It lets him maintain a sense of honor, of rebellion. It puts him above a common street thief. It's a necessary tool for maintaining the mythology of the game.
Okay, so the final test of this whole curriculum is the advice. What did they learn after paying the price? What would they tell a younger version of themselves?
The lessons from inside prison are just ruthlessly focused on mental and physical survival. It's a curriculum for immediate fortitude.
A key rule from county jail was staying in the moment. Stay in the moment, forget about the past, don't worry about the future, live now.
It's a profound psychological defense mechanism. When the future is just this massive, unknown sentence, and the past is all regret and legal trouble, the only way to stay sane is to focus on right now. The immediate goal is just survival.
Another harsh but necessary lesson was about perspective on suffering. Never complain about your sentence.
Right. The advice was to always compare yourself to someone in a worse situation, like the OG who's been fighting a death penalty case for 3 years.
It's tactical, right? Showing weakness gets you targeted.
It's tactical, and it's for psychological strength. By reframing your own suffering, you manage the anxiety of it all.
But the deepest challenge seemed to be the danger of comfort. The pot smuggler said the scariest thing was becoming comfortable in prison.
The routine, the structure, the familiarity. It can trick your mind into accepting it, into being institutionalized. He realized he had to consciously train his mind to focus on getting out, because comfort in prison is a trap. It destroys your drive to get back to the free world.
And outside of prison, the advice is more about fundamental business sense and stark self-knowledge.
And it often comes from a place of painful contradiction. We heard the pimp's wisdom, which is maybe the starkest business rule of all. You cannot sell what you consume.
You can't be trying to sell what you do. That's like getting high off your own supply.
It mandates a total separation between your personal life and your professional operation. You can't let your own habits cloud your judgment.
The motivation for so many of them was just the pursuit of winning.
The Hells Angels leader said it was just about trying to figure out a way to win, and often not caring what the cost was to get there. That singular focus is the engine of their success, but it's also the reason for their moral failure.
But the biggest lesson, the one that the game can't shield you from, was the spiritual reckoning at the end. The mafia soldier talking about the ultimate regret.
His fear of dying and feeling that overwhelming guilt about what maybe I did in my life that I knew was wrong, he said that was his personal definition of hell. And that's the moment it all collapses. The business smarts, the risk mitigation, the self-serving mythology, it all just falls apart. All the short-term success is meaningless compared to the moral cost on your soul.
And finally, there's that high-level structural advice from the ex-CIA officer. A profound warning.
He's leaving the U.S. because he believes the current direction, more legislation, economic uncertainty, political conflict, it doesn't maximize the opportunities for his kids over the next decade.
He's advising people to think about the long-term structural landscape.
His implicit message is that legitimate opportunity needs stability. Chaos, whether it's political or economic, primarily benefits the criminal element. His family leaving is a vote of no confidence in the system's stability.
So what does it all mean? We have this curriculum of highly sophisticated business principles, vertical integration, risk arbitrage, quality control.
Juxtaposed with deep moral rot and, exploitation by the very state trying to stop them.
The central contradiction of the curriculum of game seems crystal clear.
It is. The high level of business acumen and operational security you need to succeed for short-term gain is almost always tied to complete moral bankruptcy and self-destruction in the long term. The rules of the game are ruthlessly effective for making money, but they ultimately fail the user. They lead to prison, death, or that psychological collapse we saw with the mafia soldiers' fear of regret.
We've covered the rules of wholesale, the brutal cost of loyalty, the nature of violence in these organizations, and the powerful structural critiques from both sides of the law.
And if we connect all this to the bigger picture, the entire game, as defined by these traditional rules, might be on the verge of extinction. The Chinese criminal model is the new reference point. It's focused on synthetic drugs like meth and fentanyl.
Which dramatically lowers the barrier to entry.
Massively. You don't need plantations, agricultural expertise, or massive logistics for moving natural products like cocaine or weed anymore.
So this raises a final question for you, the learner, to really think about. If the core product is shifting from agricultural control to pure chemical knowledge, how will the traditional cartels, whose wisdom we just broke down, how will they survive? What new game will the next generation invent to hold on to power? The future of organized crime seems to be about controlling data, mastering chemical synthesis, and ultimately integrating with and controlling local economies. It might make the old border crossings and the old codes of force almost obsolete.